Jiang Sese fell from grace overnight, becoming the granddaughter of a criminal minister from the most delicate concubine of the third prince in the capital. Everyone laughed at her and predicted that she wouldn't get married. Until the usually honest Xie family came to propose marriage. Everyone. It's just that Lady Xie is repaying the favor of the Duke and Lady of Qin. How can such a marriage be happy? After marriage, Jiang Sese was spoiled to the point of being lawless, lying down every day waiting for someone to serve her. Everyone. No matter how good Xie Qingyun is, he is not a relative of the imperial family. Jiang Sese must have a gap in his heart. Later, Xie Qingyun held great power and the world only recognized the character Xie, not the imperial surname. Everyone was tearful and jealous. The regent is now young and successful, why should he endure the unreasonable teasing of that mother tiger at home? No one knows how many years Xie Chenjiangxiu has been thinking about Jiang Sese, as long as it is what she wants, no matter how much. In her past life, Miss Jiang from the Jiang family had 2 fiancés, but unfortunately neither of them married. The previous one remarried his sister, but later he could only reluctantly call himself Empress Dowager. The latter became the ambitious regent and had a deep bond with himself. In order to seek revenge, she did too many wrong things, and in the end, she did not let her enemies fall into their rightful fate. Instead, she was sent away by a glass of poisonous wine. Who would have thought that when Jiang Sese opened his eyes, he returned to the day of his wedding? So she worked hard to turn Xie Qingyun from an adulterous husband into a husband. Jiang Sese wanted to fulfill all the unfinished grudges and intentions in his past life. Keywords of the novel. Regent's Favorite Wife Diary. No pop-ups. Regent's Favorite Wife Diary TXT Complete Collection Download. Regent's Favorite Wife Diary Latest Chapter Reading. Chapter 1. Rebirth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Rebirth. In the vast snow, a man dressed in a black long shirt hugged a woman. He ran very quickly, his face fearful and confused. As he ran, Jiang Sese felt uncomfortable as if poison was about to be shaken out. Jiang Sese tried hard to open his eyes that were blurred by sweat, only to see a pair of phoenix eyes that were red. The perfect tail of the eye gently rises, with a few drops of sweat hanging on the slender eyelashes, swaying constantly with the owner's movements. The starry eyes are like 2 pieces of high-quality obsidian, beautiful and heart-wrenching. Xie Qingyun. He wants to save himself. I really miss the land I promised to share with him, afraid that I won't be able to cash it out if I die. The painful dizziness made Jiang Sese vomit a mouthful of blood, and due to the pain, she even lost the strength to speak. With a self-deprecating smile, I deserve this fate. Before the age of 15, Jiang Sese was so spirited, but unfortunately her grandfather suffered a disastrous defeat in the expedition and was accused of colluding with the enemy. From then on, her world turned upside down. The marriage with the third prince was originally abandoned, and only the Xie family, who had received the favor of the Qin family, came to propose marriage in the capital. But even this marriage that she despised ended up in trouble. On the day of her wedding, she was injured by her second sister and couldn't get married. Later on, Jiang Sese's life was only about revenge, darkness, and exploitation. But she's not willing to accept it, she doesn't have any enemies yet. The bloodstains fainted on the noble consort's attire, and the magnificent steps finally fell into the snow without making a sound. On his deathbed, it was as if he heard the person say to himself, "Jiang, you're alive. I'll avenge your grandfather's family, as long as you survive." It's a dream, she laughed at herself. Endless darkness surrounded her, and for some time, she unexpectedly saw a red candle in her dream. Brilliant and colorful phoenixes fly in the magnificent hall, warm and cozy tents dance with dragons. Embroidered windows and hanging curtains, silver candles and golden cups reflecting green eyebrows. A loud opening sound woke up the confused Jiang Sese. With thin sweat streaming down his body in a slight shortness of breath, Jiang Sese, who woke up, smiled sarcastically with clear and beautiful eyes. Do even dead people dream? I also dreamed of my own adulterous husband. Miss, the nanny outside is urging us. Let's get married first, it's better than staying in the Jiang mansion. The familiar voice instantly struck Jiang Sese's brain like lightning, forgetting even the absurd dream he had just had. Isn't she already gone to ashes, why can she still hear the refreshing sound? Amidst the panic, Jiang Sese knocked over the nearby candle in confusion, and the scorching temperature reminded him that this was not hell. Miss, what's wrong with you? The friendly and anxious voice of concern gradually approached, and Jiang Sese tried to lift his head to face the face in the mirror. The girl had a pair of apricot eyes that were as clear as the lake in June. Upon closer inspection, she could see the shining light in her eyes. Her iconic oval face was adorned with a tall and delicate nose, and below it was a pink cherry mouth. The bright red rouge dyed the lips a bit charming, and the red sweeping across the cheeks added charm. Red wedding attire, golden hair crown, emerald step swaying, Jiang Sese was dazed for a moment. This was not Jiang Guifei who died in the snow. The young girl at this time was too young, just like more than a decade ago. Having the courage to look around, I realized that the familiar decorations around me were the day I got married. Refreshing. Jiang Sese exclaimed uncertain. Miss, I'm here. Jiang Sese suddenly thought of a possibility, swallowing saliva and carefully caressing her delicate hands, constantly determining what year tonight is. So. Was she reborn? Even if he tried to hold back from crying, the joy of rebirth and the excitement of finally having the opportunity to seek revenge with his own hands cut off Jiang Sese's tears. Miss, if you really don't want to get married, let's run away. Qin Xian looked at Jiang Sese's tears and felt extremely regretful in his heart, blaming these petty people who have acted recklessly since the downfall of Duke Qin. No. In his previous life, Jiang Sese was unable to marry Xie Qingyun, but he colluded with him after Xie Qingyun gained great power. One is the regent who coerces the emperor to command the princes, and the other is the extravagant Jiang Guifei who disrupts the palace. Xie Qingyun's dark-hearted heart is deeply understood by Jiang Sese, and there are many absurd things he did holding her after the noble concubine's bed. At this moment, Xie Qingyun, who seemed useless, was a good place to get rid of the Jiang mansion and seek the protection of a future regent. Why didn't she? Let's go out. Various emotions in Jiang Sese's eyes slowly sank, and she shook off the strange dream just now, leaving only determination. She picked up the exquisite hollow-carved fan and slowly walked out of the embroidery tower. Outside the Xiolo, two groups of people dressed in bright red happened to face each other. Jiang Sese gently lifted the fan and smiled softly at Jiang Sese. Sister Wu won't blame me for marrying you into the third prince's mansion, will she? Jiang Sese calmly gazed at Jiang Sese, who was dressed exceptionally beautifully in front of her. After the Duke of Qin went public, Nangong Chen disregarded his own efforts and resolutely regretted his marriage. He even remarried his second sister Jiang Sese as his concubine. Although Jiang Sese tried her best to get rid of her father's humble background and could only become a concubine, it was enough for her. After all, Jiang Sese had chips. There were more and more onlookers, and at this moment, Jiang Mansion was all relatives and friends of the woman. Seeing that the heat was approaching, Jiang Sese pretended to be aggrieved and lowered her head. The second sister and the third prince are in love, so naturally the younger sister can only bless. Upon hearing these words, Jiang Sese's face stiffened involuntarily. Outsiders only knew that Nangong Chen had to remarry her in order to win over the Jiang family. But Jiang Sese knew it well for herself, because the two of them had already been married. Miss Eyre has never seen the third prince before, where did she come from? Isn't it true that the third prince likes Jiang Sese and even gives her the position of Empress Dowager? Unfortunately, something happened to the Qin family. In an instant, various murmurs and malicious glances fell on the two of them. Jiang Sese tried to maintain a proper smile and said, "Fifth sister, that's not right. I only saw the third prince from afar at various banquets. Please don't slander others' innocence casually." This sentence really intimidated everyone, and everyone looked at Arthur with disdain in their eyes. A person who loves but cannot but splashes dirty water on his sister, is fortunate not to become a third prince's consort. What do these people understand when anger and indignation appear on their faces? The third prince is just someone who eats from the bowl and looks at the pot, and even blames his own young lady. Jiang Sese was not in a hurry to fight back, but stood in place with a face full of grievances. The slightly raised corners of her mouth under the fan exposed her thoughts. Jiang Sese is waiting for the big gift that Jiang Sese gave her in her previous life. Ah! Get out of the way. A few maids in the distance were scared out of their wits and shouted desperately. A cow rushed into the crowd like a madman, while the culprit who released the wild cow was feeling proud. Jiang Sese is the darling of Mrs. Jiang. He hates the woman Jiang Sese who caused his sister to be in love with the third prince, but she has to endure it for so long. He insisted on venting his anger on behalf of his sister on this joyful day, so that Jiang Sese could be crippled by a cow. Jiang Sese caught a glimpse of the cow rushing straight towards her, and she dodged in fear. Somehow, the cow brushed past her. Ah! Hurry up and call the doctor. Help someone. The scene became extremely chaotic, with Jiang Sese covering her abdomen in pain and falling to the ground, while a continuous stream of blood tinged her happy skirt. "It hurts so much, why is your lower abdomen so painful?" Jiang Sese's sobbing voice became intermittent. How could it be like this? Even if she tampered with Jiang Sese's clothes, the cow would bump into Jiang Sese. First, explain a few points. 1. This article is fictional, with some references to historical settings such as official positions and customs, but with changes made. Please do not delve deeper too. At this moment, the male protagonist is in love without realizing it, and the female protagonist does not want to fall in love for revenge. After the male protagonist becomes enlightened, he will happily pursue marriage. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Premarital Sex. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Premarital Sex. Jiang Sese was already scared out of his wits, and he actually harmed his own sister. The women of the Jiang family hurriedly gathered around, and the eldest lady almost fainted in fear as she watched her daughter fall into a pool of blood. It was Mrs. Jiang who presided over the transfer of the person to a nearby room. "You scumbag! It's all you who caused Shuer." The restless and anxious lady saw Jiang Sese and rushed forward with a brisk step, immediately finding a vent. Unexpectedly, Jiang Sese calmly grasped the slap that the grand lady intended to drop. "Madam, I didn't let the cow go. I can't blame it either." The doctor's face turned pale in an instant. Of course, she knew it was her son who did it, but so what? Sese didn't mean it. "Everyone shut up, let's first see how Sese is doing." Mrs. Jiang coldly glanced at everyone, and everyone instantly fell silent. Jiang Sese saw the eldest lady anxiously waiting, sitting leisurely on the side waiting. Few people in the world knew that Jiang Sese's medical master was Dr. Mo, and with just one glance, she knew that Jiang Sese's child could not be saved. Yes, Jiang Sese did it intentionally. Jiang Sese can't rely on this child to have unlimited fame anymore. She should think carefully about how to protect her reputation. "Old lady, Miss Eyre has already woken up, it's just the child in her belly, it's gone." The doctor, who was over 50 years old, trembled and spoke out the result, feeling extremely scared. How could he know that a girl who was about to get married was 2 months pregnant? These wealthy families are really dirty. "What are you saying?" The eldest lady screamed and pounced. "When did her daughter get pregnant?" quacked doctor. Jiang Sese in the inner room clearly knew the news, and her endless hatred almost drowned her out. In the past few months, Jiang Sese has been busy with her wedding affairs, but she didn't know she was already pregnant. Otherwise, she would have been very careful. If this child were still alive, she would be the hero who gave birth to Nan Gongchen's first child, but now everything has changed. Jiang Sese suppressed his pleasure and pretended to be surprised, saying, "Second sister's child. What's going on? Isn't it just a quack doctor talking nonsense?" For a moment, the lobby quieted down. Premarital promiscuity was such a serious crime. The eldest lady didn't have time to feel sorry for her deceased grandson anymore and looked at Mrs. Jiang helplessly. Mrs. Jiang's face turned blue and red. Obviously, she didn't expect such a thing to happen either. If she had gotten married quietly, she would have, but unfortunately, she lost her child today. Everyone is watching me do what? Now we can only ask Xue to quickly get married, and this matter is in everyone's stomachs. Mrs. Jiang gritted her teeth and instructed the maid to dress up Jiang Sese, who was still unable to get up. It's not surprising to see this result. Even if Jiang Sese is still bleeding heavily, Mrs. Jiang will still put her in a sedan chair. In her past life, she had her legs broken by a collision, and in the end, she was held up by the Jiang family for an unlucky reputation, which prevented Jiang Sese from getting married in her sedan chair. She could only stay in the Jiang family and be laughed at by others. This time, they were hit by snow picking in the Pearl River. Naturally, they had to pretend that nothing had happened, but is that possible? Watching Jiang Sese be replaced with a simple spare wedding dress, which was originally custom-made by the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and only had time to hastily paint her makeup, Jiang Sese smiled softly and deserved it. With this release, the originally joyful atmosphere was completely destroyed. Even if the Jiang family tried to bury it, how could such a big event be hidden in front of everyone? The female relatives exchanged glances with each other, watching Jiang Sese walk up supported by someone. Various whispers penetrated into Jiang Sese's ears, and she wished to kill Jiang Sese. Why did Arthur hide? If she hadn't, the cow wouldn't have hit her. After getting married, we should be together with our husband and children, understand how to advance and retreat, and not be jealous of small things. On stage, Mrs. Jiang was reciting the originally written words with a tired face and no expression. Jiang Sese respectfully nodded and said yes, allowing the nearby grandmother to cover her head. Jiang Sese gritted her teeth, enduring immense pain and trying to stand firm. The hatred in her eyes was overwhelming, and Jiang Sese only smiled lightly about it. "It's all your fault, it's you who caused trouble to my sister." Jiang Qingshi, who was small in strength but not small, suddenly rushed out and stared fiercely at Jiang Sese, intending to push her. "Ah sure." Mrs. Jiang's face changed and she quickly called for someone to stop Jiang Qingshi. Jiang Qingshi can be as rude as usual, but causing trouble in such occasions will only make others feel that their Jiang family is not well-mannered. "When my sister, who was playing with cows, fell down, it's now my fault. It's probably because she bullied her parents and wasn't by her side," Jiang Sese said, tears streaming down her face, a pitiful expression. Arthur's birth mother passed away when she was 10 years old, and her father chose to join the army after that. After a major war, there was no news of her, but her death was not registered because no bones were found. Therefore, as soon as Jiang Sese talked about this topic, everyone couldn't help but feel pity. Poor little girl in the Jiang mansion doesn't know what kind of injustice she has suffered. The young master of the Jiang family has always been domineering. "Before, he snatched my son's toy, you didn't know. At such a young and malicious age, I don't know what the future holds." Both siblings have this virtue, and Mrs. Jiang is probably also. Madam, seeing the contemptuous gaze of everyone, wished she could drink Jiang Sese's blood. It was this broom star who caused her own daughter to have an accident, and her son was even pointed at by others. The time has come, why don't you hurry up and get into the sedan chair? Mrs. Jiang, as she hugged Jiang Qing, looked at Jiang Sese with disgust. In the past, although Jiang Sese was smart, he always remembered the face of the Jiang family. Today, I don't know if it's because he's going to get married that he looks so ugly to the Jiang family. The thing Qin Shuanghe gave birth to is an immature white-eyed wolf. Jiang Sese was completely indifferent to Mrs. Jiang's attitude. Mrs. Jiang was not her own grandmother, but was carried up by her concubine after her original wife's death. She deeply bid farewell to the courtyard where she grew up, and the next time we meet, the Jiang family will wait to enjoy the pain of losing something that doesn't belong to them. Outside the door, the sound of gongs, drums, and firecrackers grew louder and louder, and Jiang Sese slowly walked out with his refreshing hands. Both welcoming teams turned their attention to each other. The 16-year-old girl was dressed in a bright red robe, her waist was tied tightly and she held it tightly. Her red head embroidered with bats covered her beauty, but it was difficult to block her overall demeanor. Nangong Chen's eyes inexplicably paused for a moment, then turned away in disgust. Jiang Sese was just a vicious woman relying on the Duke of Qin, how could she be compared to Shuai? The bride is getting on the sedan chair. Countless petals were scattered, and on a road south of the city, red lanterns were hung high, adorned with golden coils. Xie Qingyun was dressed in red clothes, forcefully dispelling the chill around him. His ink hair was tied up, leaving only a strand swaying in the wind. The narrow and long Danfeng's eyes were like a 1,000-year-old iceberg, but it collided with the red light. Jiang Sese. Even though it was so far away, Xie Qingyun's voice still fell clearly in Jiang Sese's ear. He had lived for 2 lifetimes and had never felt as safe as the voice of the great traitor Xie Qingyun. Under the red veil, a faint smile flashed in Jiang Sese's heart, and she sat steadily according to the rules. Get up the sedan. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Escaping Marriage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Escaping Marriage. The 4 sides of the sedan frame are covered with red silk curtains, embroidered with patterns such as goldfish playing with lotus flowers, red phoenix rising in the morning, Qilin giving birth, wealthy peonies, and everything goes smoothly. The red sedan is slowly carried into the Xie mansion amidst the cheers of passers-by. Our bride is here. Another round of drums and gongs played, and Jiang Sese clearly felt the sedan chair slowing down. He walked forward and took a hand, and Jiang Sese walked out gracefully. Even though she couldn't see through the cover, she could still sense Xie Qingyun's position, so the temperature in that place was always inexplicably lower. A bow to heaven and earth. Erbai Gaotang. Couples worship. Jiang Sese held one end of the red rope and bowed obediently. On the other end, Xie Qingyun's eyes flickered with darkness, and in the end, he just squeezed the red rope with just the right amount of force. Send into the bridal chamber. In an instant, all the relatives and friends of the Xie family burst into laughter. No matter how much Jiang Sese had caused trouble before, now that he entered the door, he was their Xie family member. Madame Xie couldn't breathe a sigh of relief. She was really afraid that Miss Jiang Sese would become angry and refuse to marry. The old lady helped the mistress to leave first, and a group of young people in the hall were happily going to make a scene in the bridal chamber. Qingyun, we have to get you drunk this time. How could you marry someone like Qingyun? Oh, there's a beautiful lady waiting. Is Qingyun in a hurry? The teasing of his classmates made Xie Qingyun, who had always been aloof and self-disciplined, drink a few more glasses, and then another one. Xie Qingyun's eyes remained clear, not even showing a hint of drunkenness. Qingyun, I can't tell that you have such a good tolerance for alcohol. Huang Liantong stared blankly at the empty row of wine jars and cursed Xie Qingyun, the old 6, in his heart. It turned out that he was 1,000 cups that never poured. My wife is happy and quiet, so I won't invite everyone to have a wedding party today. Xie Qingyun put down the silver wine cup, his eyebrows and eyes slightly intoxicated by the wine. Everyone quickly chuckled and pushed Xie Qingyun into the newly built courtyard of the Xie family. Jiang Sese was closing his eyes to rest when he felt a cool breeze blowing by. Immediately, the door was fastened and a step slowly stepped over. Xie Qingyun bent down and carefully depicted the pattern on the woman's head by candlelight, then pursed his lips and lifted the head while Jiang Sese waited quietly. A bundle of red clothes, black patterned cloud sleeves, Xie Qingyun lowered his eyes and face, and his slender and graceful fingers carried the light and flowing cover. At such a close distance, Jiang Sese could see his slender eyelashes and perfect thin lips mixed with wine, graceful as a startled swan, still remaining a solitary in thin snowy frost. I will abide by all 3 chapters of our agreement. Tonight, I will go to the study to sleep, and I will explain it to my mother. Xie Qingyun put down his head and casually threw down a sentence. However, Jiang Sese was suddenly startled by some memories of death. Before getting married, Jiang Sese forced Xie Qingyun to sign a post-marriage agreement with him. 1. Are not allowed to share rooms. 2. You are not allowed to meet the Jiang family without authorization. 3. I can't handle anything I bring with me as a reward. Jiang Sese will not interfere with Xie Qingyun's private life. At this moment, thinking about this agreement, Jiang Sese quickly accepted it after a moment of contemplation. It would be better not to do that with Xie Qingyun. In her past life, the other party didn't know if it was to retaliate against Jiang Sese's dissatisfaction with the Xie family's marriage during her teenage years. Every time she pulled her red apricot out of the wall, it made her unable to sleep well all night. Jiang Sese's beautiful eyes shone brightly, but he didn't rush to reveal his intentions. He looked at his former adulterer, who rarely relaxed and looked around casually. Let's have a toast first. After finishing speaking, Jiang Sese got up and filled himself with 2 glasses of wine. The color of the wine was clear and there was a hint of fruity aroma, which was Jiang Sese's favorite flavor. Upon hearing this, Xie Qingyun looked at Jiang Sese with a cold gaze that seemed to dissect her soul. Jiang Sese's face didn't show, but his hand unconsciously tightened. Without him, Jiang Sese was forced into the palace in his previous life and finally climbed to the imperial throne. In order to stand firm, he teamed up with her and Xie Qingyun. Although the 2 were once unmarried couples, they had clear purposes for each other. One for finding evidence to avenge his grandfather, and the other for the great Yan dynasty. Xie Qingyun also had a skin-to-skin relationship with Jiang Sese in order to deepen their cooperation. Jiang Sese is not someone who would give the initiative to others. There are too many things that are designed to secretly restrain him. Therefore, with a cold glance from Xie Qingyun, Jiang Sese instinctively felt guilty, afraid that the other party would be able to peek out his thoughts. Fortunately, Xie Qingyun only took the wine glass and gently extended his hand in coordination. Jiang Sese quickly raised his glass and approached Xie Qingyun, their strange fragrances intertwined, creating an ambiguous atmosphere. Between the wine glasses, a jade pendant in Arthur's arms fell out due to the gesture of raising the glass. Both of them chased after the jade pendant, and at the moment when they saw it clearly, Jiang Sese's face stiffened slightly. Coincidentally, this jade pendant was an engagement token given to her by Nangong Chen before. The prominent Chen character above doesn't require much thought, and Xie Qingyun also knows who it comes from. He didn't question or even get angry, just drank the sake in one gulp, and the cold temperature slowly dispelled a strange restlessness in his heart. There are rice dumpling in the small kitchen. If you are hungry, let the servant girl bring them to you. After speaking, Xie Qingyun stood up calmly and walked towards the door, seemingly indifferent to his newlywed wife's infidelity. Someone pushed open the door faster than him, and Su Qin waved the letter in her hand with a smile on her face. "Miss, it's a letter from the 3rd prince. Let Miss leave through the back door as agreed." Su Qing looked at Xie Qingyun with a slanted gaze, seemingly completely indifferent to the absurdity of talking about running away in front of the male host. While feeling angry, Jiang Sese felt amused. Jiang Sese had just lost her child and didn't go to rest, yet she didn't forget to tie herself up. It seems that the other party is not satisfied with whether she can marry into the Xie family. Su Qing saw that Jiang Sese had no expression of joy, but instead stared at herself, inexplicably furrowing her heart. "Miss, didn't you say you pretended to leave the Jiang mansion first and then go find the third prince?" Jiang Sese reached out and took off the heavy headgear, with a faint sneer at the corner of his mouth. "You go prepare the car first, and I'll be there soon." Third prince. In his past life, he still needed to call himself the Empress Dowager with resentment, and in this life, he looks down on him even more. Su Qing suddenly felt relieved, and with a provocative glance, Xie Qingyun rushed to prepare with great excitement. After confirming that no one would break in again, Jiang Sese turned around and stared seriously at Xie Qingyun. Perhaps the two of them have done too many bad things together in the past, and Jiang Sese has been separated not once or twice. Deeply aware of Xie Qingyun's narrow-minded approach, she immediately decided that it was necessary to explain well, in order to prevent this black-hearted person from secretly calculating herself as well. "Jiang Sese, you really dislike me so much." "A little bit because of the hoarseness of drinking too much alcohol and the light questioning." Xie Qingyun just turned his head expressionlessly to look at the young lady who had been pampered for over a decade. "When I first met Jiang Sese, she was as fat as a ball. Now, Jiang Sese's black hair is set in emerald jade, and her light eyebrows and red makeup are even more beautiful than I thought when I was young. The only thing that doesn't change is that Jiang Sese is still very imaginative. He even married into the Xie family and thought he could escape. If it weren't for Jiang Sese's cousin's sake, Xie Qingyun would really want to pry open this young lady's head and see what she's thinking. Surprisingly, I can fall in love with this kind of grass bun like Nangong Chen. If you go out tonight, you'll just get poked and scolded in the spine. At least don't go tonight." The icy voice of Xie Qingyun suddenly calmed Jiang Sese's restless heart due to his rebirth. Although Xie Qingyun and her gangsters may have mixed elements of revenge against themselves, it cannot be denied that the two of them have been scolded by the civil and military officials of the Manchu dynasty for so many years and still feel a bit of empathy towards each other. Xie Qingyun's familiar opinion instantly brought Jiang Sese back to the time when the two of them were talking about killing and setting fire while holding candles at night. Just as Jiang Sese bent his eyebrows and eyes to say something, his gaze touched Xie Qingyun's groom's robe, and a hint of guilt flashed through his heart. No matter what his intentions were in the past, Jiang Sese did hurt him time and time again for the sake of the third prince. On the day of his wedding, he waited at the Jiang family's doorstep like a fool because of the hurt. Jiang Sese let out a faint sigh in her heart, and the indescribable guilt unexpectedly took the upper hand. She instinctively hugged Xie Qingyun. At this time, Xie Qingyun was not as thin as a high-ranking minister, and was still an 18-year-old boy with full abdominal muscles. Whether it's a reaction after drinking or something, Xie Qingyun's skin is inexplicably hot. Jiang Sese's hand was pricked by the scorching heat, but he suppressed the idea of retreating. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. No longer thinking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. No longer thinking. Thank you, Xie Qingyun. Thank you for helping me regardless of past grievances. The sentence that he had never had the chance to say in his previous life now resounded clearly in Xie Qingyun's ear. Xie Qingyun's unchanging iceberg face showed a rare hint of shock, and he looked at the person in his arms with suspicion. Is this what Jiang Sese would say? When Jiang Sese was still Xie Qingyun's fiancé AE, he was both annoyed and afraid of him. However, later on, he became accustomed to his existence by colluding with him without proper justification. The night before my death, the silence was so boring that I shamefully dreamed of him time and time again. The familiar feeling entered her arms again, and she was surprised to find that Xie Qingyun's temperature was so comfortable. Jiang Sese tidied up his emotions and left Xie Qingyun's embrace, seriously looking into his eyes. Believe me, the jade pendant was forgotten by the maid to be taken away. The letter just now was from my second sister who slandered me. When I return home tomorrow, I will confront her. Xie Qingyun's gaze was heavy, not knowing what he was thinking, but his subconscious slightly bent fingers gave Jiang Sese the thought to continue speaking. Xie Qingyun, I admit that I used to have fantasies about the third prince, but now that I'm married into the Xie family, I won't provoke anyone else. Seeing Xie Qingyun staring straight at him with unfathomable eyes, Jiang Sese also understood that continuing to speak could easily expose himself. Although Jiang Sese did not change the core, after all, if Xie Qingyun, who was almost a demon, discovers that it is not safe, it will be burned to death by the method. Do you need my help? After finally waiting for Xie Qingyun's reply, Jiang Sese hesitated slightly. Has this matter been too easy in the past? Is Xie Qingyun just considering how to help himself? In the past, asking him to help kill someone would have asked her a few times, but now that he is so talkative, it makes Jiang Sese feel anxious. I want to solve it myself, said Jiang Sese, bending her bright big eyes and gently shaking her head. Faced with such a light and cheerful smile from Jiang Sese, Xie Qingyun's eyes gradually darkened, and then he gently glanced away. He doesn't care who Jiang Sese likes, but for the sake of the reputation of the Xie family, it's impossible for Jiang Sese to bear the scandal of running away on his wedding night. Just as Jiang Sese was inexplicably flustered by his actions, suspecting whether the other party felt that he had changed too quickly, an anxious voice sounded in his heart. Miss, what happened? Can I come in? Jiang Sese quickly stepped forward and opened the door. Seeing that both Miss and Uncle were well, he was puzzled and succinctly explained Su Qing's recent actions in detail. Jiang Sese gestured to Qin Xian to lock the door, and then pondered his guess and plan. What? She's a picky eater. Upon hearing that Su Qing had been bribed by Miss Eyre, she felt so angry that she wished she could be strangled to death. It was fortunate that Miss Eyre treated her so well. You just calm down and lock Su Qing up first. I have my own way tomorrow. Qin Xian obediently nodded, thinking that it was getting late, and tentatively asked, Miss, let's go wash it first. Jiang Sese noticed that it was getting late, so he nodded and looked up at Xie Qingyun sitting at the table drinking. Xie Qingyun felt a sense and looked back, then I went to the study. Wait a minute. Jiang Sese quickly got up, but on his wedding night, he divided the rooms. It was rumored that Xie Qingyun would be laughed at. As a grasshopper bound to a rope sooner or later, Jiang Sese admits to having some loyalty. With a skillful move, Jiang Sese lifted his eyes and a shallow mist covered his clear and bright eyes. He bit his lips and whispered, Xie Qingyun, can you please don't leave? On our wedding night, I don't want to be alone. Miss, the water is good. Qin Xian didn't care where Xie Qingyun was going. Anyway, her daughter couldn't be wronged, and she and the little maid wanted to help Jiang Sese take a shower first. Jiang Sese pretended to be stubborn and waited for Xie Qingyun's answer, a trick she had used in her past life for the sake of securing favor. Xie Qingyun couldn't help but recall her childhood when she looked at Jiang Sese's expression. She was very delicate and often had this expression on her cousin. The expression on Qin Qinglu's face, which pretended to be righteous and resolute, always carried a hint of grievance and expectation, like a handful of mung bean soup that seduced people in June, pouring Qin Qinglu's impatience clean. He did everything in his power to marry the Qin family back for the sake of saving their lives. Tonight, he will cooperate with her again. After receiving a positive response, Jiang Sese slowly walked into the clean room with peace of mind, supported by Qin Xian and the little maid. The expression on his face faded completely when he turned around, flashing with a lively shrewdness. The warm water made Jiang Sese couldn't help but take a long sigh of relief. Xie Jiasheng is afraid that Miss Jiang from the Jiang family will not be able to live a simple life, and everything in the new house has been customized according to her preferences. Such a simple Xie family, she had never been grateful in her previous life. You can also bring some hot water for uncle to wash. Xie Qingyun must have been sweating all day after being tired, and he wouldn't feel comfortable without washing. Jiang Sese widened her eyes and whispered, "Miss, why bother with him? And miss, you actually call him uncle." The little maid was even more frightened and scattered all her changed clothes on the ground. Jiang Sese stiffened his face and took this opportunity to express his attitude to Jiang Sese. He wanted to hold Xie Qingyun's thigh and cooperate for mutual benefit. "I admit I used to hate Xie Qingyun, but since we got married, we still have to live a good life. Is it possible that I still have to dream of being a princess now?" Jiang Sese could only grit his teeth and endure shame, seeing the two little maids bewildered. And Xie Qingyun is indeed handsome and considerate. Living a comfortable life is the most important. Why bother with whether your husband is a royal relative? Jiang Sese and the little maid blushed slightly upon hearing the words. In terms of appearance, there were only a few in the capital who could match Jiang Sese, but Xie Qingyun was one of the leaders. Jiang Sese saw that the two were finally convinced by himself and nodded in satisfaction. "I've washed it, can you help uncle prepare it?" Jiang Sese put on his inner clothes and slowly walked out. Xie Qingyun heard Jiang Sese asking a maid to help him take a hot shower, lowered his eyes, and lightly tapped his fingers on the table, leaving only one sentence in his mind. "Jiang Sese really seems to be possessed by a ghost today." Qinqin and Su lightly let go of the water and quietly withdrew, while Xie Qingyun was busy with his clothes inside and outside. Seeing that Xie Qingyun had no one to serve her, Jiang Sese blushed slightly. Because she disliked Xie Qingyun, she naturally refused to let Xie Qingyun's servants enter her wedding room. In the future, we still need to find two caring maids to serve Xie Qingyun. "I have washed it." The unwashed water flowed down Xie Qingyun's tall nose, with a hint of abstinence between his eyebrows and eyes as if due to the water vapor. On the bed, there was only Jiang Sese left, wearing only a white inner garment. Perhaps due to the heat, a section of her delicate white calf protruded restlessly from her pants. Xie Qingyun saw that Jiang Sese's toes were round and plump like fine southern pearls, and his pink fingernails had not been dyed, making him look like a piece of pink lotus root. "I sleep outside." Perhaps the other person, who was more promiscuous in his past life, had also seen it before, so Jiang Sese didn't realize anything was wrong. He consciously stood up to make way, and naturally missed the slightest discomfort that flashed through Xie Qingyun's earlobe. Covering himself with a blanket, Jiang Sese was not used to this luxurious bed at first, but today he was really tired and fell asleep in a daze. In the darkness, Xie Qingyun opened his eyes and slowly extended his curled fingers, suspiciously landing on Jiang Sese's hair. "Don't get up and reveal her face. Even the small mole on the earlobe is the same. It's impossible to change people, but why is she not stupid?" Jiang Sese didn't know what he had dreamed of, so he arched his body uncomfortable. Xie Qingyun quickly withdrew his hand. Xie Qingyun, unable to sleep, lightly recited the inscription on the top of the bed, his cold eyes showing a rare touch of humanization. "Jiang Sese, I hope you don't have to find me a mess. I have made a slight modification to the details, which does not affect the plot." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Why Marry Me? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Why Marry Me? The spring breeze exudes a warm feeling and skillfully burrows into the bed. Gradually sobering up, Arthur anxiously grasped the blanket and slowly let go of it when he saw the familiar red curtain. It's not a dream, she's truly reborn. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and then something came to mind. Jiang Sese turned his head to look at Xie Qingyun, who was not yet clear-headed. In their previous lives, the two of them always acted hastily with a fear of being discovered. Xie Qingyun and himself could count the number of times they slept until dawn with one hand. Therefore, seeing Xie Qingyun's sleeping face, Jiang Sese couldn't help but take two more glances. When Xie Qingyun fell asleep, his eyelashes obediently covered his eyelids, casting a dark color into his eyes. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that his skin was very smooth, with only a slight dryness. Jiang Sese looked at it and met a pair of eyes. The owner of the eyes still had a hint of confusion because they had just woken up. Janser. Jiang Sese responded with a sigh and saw that his eyes quickly regained their usual coldness. I'll ask Jiang Sese to come in and help me wash up. As he spoke, Jiang Sese was about to lift the blanket. I don't know what came to mind, but Xie Qingyun held down the blanket and said in a slightly hoarse voice to Jiang Sese's skeptical gaze, "Wait a minute." That kind of gaze almost instantly evoked some colorful memories for Jiang Sese. She only knew that Xie Qingyun, who was nearly 30 years old, was very angry in the morning. She didn't expect that Xie Qingyun, who was only 18 years old, would also be so energetic. In his heart, he cursed a pervert, and Jiang Sese could only obediently hide in the blanket waiting for Xie Qingyun to speak. For a while, Xie Qingyun only maintained a sitting posture without moving. He had always restrained himself, but unfortunately had a ridiculous dream this morning, so much so that he dared not even lift the blanket now. If it weren't for the thin and slightly pursed lips, it would be almost impossible to see anything from Xie Qingyun's clear and cold face. Jiang Sese knew he had to go back to his door to serve tea today, so he couldn't help but give Xie Qingyun a light push and urge him to hurry up. The woman's lubricated skin brushed against the back of Xie Qingyun's hand, as if a dry well had encountered rain. The cluster of fire that Xie Qingyun had just extinguished strangely had a hint of resurgence. I'm fine, you go wash up first. Xie Qingyun dodged Jiang Sese's exploration and leaned his body slightly, leaving only a particularly serious voice. Jiang Sese could only hold on to his fragmented thoughts and get up from bed. Due to Xie Qingyun's awkward reaction, Jiang Sese did not shout to refresh his heart, but instead washed himself up. At half an hour, Xie Qingyun quickly got down to the bed. Seeing Xie Qingyun's normal appearance, Jiang Sese was no longer distracted by him and calmly let his heart enter. Jiang Sese quickly came in and helped Jiang Sese comb a dignified woman's head, paired with a pink floral dress. When Jiang Sese tidied up and looked at Xie Qingyun, he saw that the person was dressed in a blue long shirt with a jade white belt, and his dark long hair was tied with a light headband to form a high ponytail. He was even more outstanding than cold jade. If it weren't for living together for more than 10 years, Jiang Sese wouldn't have believed how ruthless the cold and aloof young master, who now has a high and dignified appearance, was in calculating people. After just one glance, Jiang Sese withdrew his gaze and ordered Jiang Sese. Qin, you go and escort Su Qing onto the carriage. After we finish serving tea, we will go to Jiangfu. At this moment, in the cold spring courtyard, Chen Chuanjiao muttered discontentedly about how uncooperative Jiang Sese was at yesterday's wedding, being an hour late. Mrs. Xie patted her eldest daughter-in-law's hand, indicating that she should be more patient with Jiang Sese. Chen Chuanjiao's anger suddenly came up, and Jiang Sese still thought of herself as the third prince's consort. Who dares to marry her in the entire capital now, except for their solid-eyed Xie family? What does Jinjiao look like in a day? Otherwise, my mother-in-law would be foolish to come back from marrying such a troublesome woman just to repay her kindness. Actually, Mrs. Xie has no confidence in her heart. She was already very happy that she was able to attend the church smoothly yesterday. She can only pray that Jiang Sese will not lose his temper today. After all, she seems to have no way out if Jiang Sese really causes trouble in the Xie family. Madam, here you are. Li Mama walked into the hall with a smile on her face to report, and Mrs. Xie's heart suddenly lifted. This little ancestor should quickly finish serving tea, so we can avoid this daughter-in-law in the future. From afar, everyone saw a pair of people walking towards them. Dad, Mom, drink tea. Under the signal of the old lady, Jiang Sese held the tea in a proper manner. Mr. Xie simply drank it neatly and stuffed a bulging purse into it. Mrs. Xie also stuffed a big purse, not even daring to say what she should have taught the bride, afraid that this little ancestor would explode. However, Jiang Sese took the initiative to sincerely express to the Xie family that he would definitely be a good wife. Madame Xie widened her eyes and looked at her son with suspicion. Jiang Sese shouldn't have been possessed by anything, right? Xie Qingyun didn't receive his mother's gaze, just lowered his eyes and listened to what Jiang Sese said, raising his eyebrows in unison and harmonizing with the Qin and Se. With a hint of exploration in her eyes, it landed on Arthur, but she remained so lively that even the curve of her eyebrows raised when it came to happiness was the same. The ghostly expressions on everyone's faces clearly made Jiang Sese embarrassed. It was her negligence that caused her to switch too quickly, and everyone couldn't react. Jiang Sese quickly moved on to the next step to skip this less smooth start. This is a precious pearl, it's so cute. Come on, this is my welcome gift. Jiang Sese took the purse from Qin Xian's hand and handed it to Xie Nanju, who was playing with the cloth bag. Xie Baozhu, who is only 1 year old, is the eldest son of the Xie family and the eldest daughter of Chen Chuanjiao. The little one is round and round like a lucky doll. Jiang Sese couldn't help but kiss, and Xie Baozhu reluctantly pouted and pouted at Jiang Sese. Jiang Sese immediately opened the purse with insight, revealing the small wave drum made of gold. Little pearl, do you like this? Xie Baozhu glanced at her and her mouth was about to drool. She affectionately opened her hands and asked Jiang Sese to hug her. Xie Qingyun's gaze naturally withdrew as he fell on this side. He was originally worried that Jiang Sese would not be able to handle Xie Baozhu's unpleasant face, which led to an unpleasant scene early in the morning. However, he didn't expect to be bribed with a tambourine. Only Mr. Xie's face turned black while he was on the side. The reason why the emotional granddaughter always ignored her was because she didn't give enough money. Mrs. Xie had not yet regained her composure from Jiang Sese's kind smile when she received a reminder from her mother.in-law and quickly asked, "Sese, are all the things for returning home ready?" "Mom, everything is ready. Don't worry, it's almost time to leave at this time." Jiang Sese knew that his previous performance was too poor, and no matter how good the Xie family was, they couldn't immediately get along well with him, so he took the initiative to leave and ease everyone's embarrassment. Madame Xie unconsciously breathed a sigh of relief and gave a few more words of advice to Xie Qingyun before quickly escorting the person out. Watching the two people leave, the Xie family gathered around. "Mom, what's going on with Jiang Sese? Last month, she was still hanging herself and said she wouldn't marry us poor people even if she died." Chen Chuanjiao held Xie Baozhu, her already not very clever mind twisted into a paste. "I've been staring at you for a few days, asking so many questions about what to do and not even going back to your yard to exercise. I've been slacking off again, and my belly is about to bulge out." Madame Xie shook her handkerchief and entered the inner room with a heavy head. If she could understand Jiang Sese, she wouldn't even dare to put on some of her mother.in-law's airs. Only Chen Chuanjiao and Xie Liqing stood in place, staring at each other, staring blankly as the carriage carrying Jiang Sese and Xie Qingyun slowly left. In the carriage, Jiang Sese secretly glanced at Xie Qingyun sitting across from him. Xie Qingyun has always been silent, even if he doesn't speak for a day, it's normal. But at this moment, Jiang Sese had too many thoughts that needed to be slowly clarified through speech. The reserved nature of his newlywed wife only made Jiang Sese symbolically obedient and half a pillar of incense, so he carefully opened his mouth. "Xie Qingyun, marrying me is your mother's intention, and what about you?" Jiang Sese deliberately pinched his handkerchief and pretended to be shy, probing. This answer determined how Jiang Sese would hold Xie Qingyun's thigh in the future. "Dear children, yesterday the first chapter was blocked all the time. I have made many changes to my chapter, and if there are still any issues with chapter confusion, I will make further changes. Have a great time chasing books." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Harmony and Separation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Harmony and Separation. Xie Qingyun lifted his eyes to look at her. Perhaps due to the heat, the woman's face, which could have been shattered by a blow, had a hint of redness, which somehow reminded him of this morning's absurd dream. Presumably, at an advanced age, a man with strong blood and vigor will dream of some strange things. Xie Qingyun calmly averted his gaze and said, "If I don't like or dislike you, I won't treat you unfairly as you are honest." Jiang Sese had anticipated this answer, and Xie Qingyun had never expressed his liking for her. In his previous life, he only reached the deepest point by kissing her hair with his eyes turning red. "If you have a woman you like, I won't mind, I'm even willing to. Are you taking a concubine for me?" Xie Qingyun suddenly spoke up, even with a faint tone, but Jiang Sese still heard a hint of shallow sarcasm. Xie Qingyun's cold gaze moved away from the book and only landed on Jiang Sese's face. This sentence made him feel ridiculous for no reason, even though his hand under his sleeve wrinkled the page of the book without realizing it. How could he let her leave and be sold again after he agreed to marry? "I don't even know." Jiang Sese, after all these days, still can't understand the danger in people's hearts. "Of course not." Arthur quickly denied, asking the woman he liked to be his concubine, which was too much for him. Xie Qingyun's lips pursed slightly and inexplicably loosened. "As long as you give me a piece of paper and a farewell letter, I am willing to give up the position of legitimate wife," Jiang Sese promised confidently. "Jiang Sese, did you talk to me about divorce on your first day of marriage?" Xie Qingyun's expression slowed down instead, only curling up his fingers slightly and looking at the other person with a gaze like ink. "I just want to tell you that I am grateful that you are willing to marry me. If you encounter your own happiness in the future, I will not stop you." Arthur also tore off his disguise and looked back calmly and clearly. This is Jiang Sese's sincere words. Xie Qingyun never owes himself anything, but on the contrary, Jiang Sese deliberately approached Xie Qingyun with other intentions. In his previous life, Xie Qingyun was nearly 30 years old and had not married. He had many romantic relationships, but who knows if Xie Qingyun had some kind of white moonlight in his heart. They have never been together because of love. They use each other's needs and explain everything clearly to facilitate the next step of cooperation. "I won't have a girl I like." Xie Qingyun closed his book and said this sentence lightly but slowly. Jiang Sese, this woman, wouldn't think that everyone, like her, would hang themselves if they lost love. He has already exhausted his friendship with Qin Qinglu for over a decade by marrying Jiang Sese in his lifetime. If he had another woman, he might not have had peace for the rest of his life. Jiang Sese no longer hesitated, and it was not too late to talk to Xie Qingyun when he had a crush. Now that he was his legitimate wife, he was not afraid of someone without a shadow. "Miss, it's almost here." The refreshing voice pulled Jiang Sese back to reality, and she nodded, unable to sit still. She simply lifted the curtain and looked at the approaching Jiang mansion. Sure enough, the carriage of the third prince's mansion was also there. Jiang Sese really didn't even bother to rest just to make herself uncomfortable. "Oh, Miss Wu is back." The butler Lin Bo had sharp eyes and smiled, asking someone to make room for the carriage. With a smile on his face, Jiang Sese helped his refreshing subordinates out of the car, glanced at Xie Qingyun, and quietly tugged at his sleeve. "This is Lin Bo." "Hello uncle, hurry in." Lin Bo, a servant, was not involved in the dispute with Jiang Fu and was still very respectful to Jiang Sese. Xie Qingyun nodded expressionlessly, but did not resist Jiang Sese holding his hand. Instead, he cooperated so that Jiang Sese couldn't help but look sideways. In the hall of the Jiang mansion, even with thick rouge, Jiang Sese couldn't conceal her dark eyes. Yesterday, as soon as she arrived at the third prince's mansion, she was questioned about her child by Nan Gongchen. Nan Gongchen's anger can be imagined. On the day of his wedding, he became the laughing stock of the entire royal family. If it weren't for his inability to worship the hall and losing face, Nangongchen would have wished to go straight to the Jiang family's doorstep and return home. Even though Jiang Sesse's crying and crying were all pushed to Jiang Sese, it did not change the fact that the southern palace Chen stayed elsewhere on her wedding night, and the incident of sending someone to frame Jiang Sese did not follow. This morning, Empress Dowager was also putting herself in trouble everywhere. Fortunately, Empress Dowager was willing to help her resolve the rumors for her son's sake. Now the hatred drives Jiang Sese to take the pill and ignore the obstruction to return home. She insists on embarrassing Jiang Sese in person to relieve her hatred. Shuer, go plead with Empress Dowager and ask her to clarify. When she clarifies, she will also speak for your younger brother. Now outsiders don't know how to mock your younger brother for not understanding the rules. The eldest lady complained and put down the teacup, looking at her daughter expectantly. How can I speak up about the trouble caused by Qingshi? Jiang Sese almost pinched her beautiful nails, and the pain of losing her child made her unable to help but hold a grudge against her younger brother. If it weren't for Jiang Qingshi's assurance that the cow was obedient, she wouldn't have come up with this plan. How could she now speak up to Consort De? Are you so indifferent to your younger brother? Mrs. Jiang opened her half-narrowed eyes, full of reproach. Jiang Sese's heart seemed to have been stabbed, and her mother and grandmother knew what kind of pain she had endured yesterday to soothe Nangongchen. Jiang Qingshi was a precious treasure, should she suffer. As soon as Arthur entered the door, he noticed that the atmosphere was not right. Is the atmosphere not right? That's right. Wu Mei, have you come back? We're still saying that Xie Mansion doesn't have pearl powder to apply to your hands. Would you be angry and not come back? Miss Jiang, the third miss of the Jiang family, has never been favored at home. She didn't dare to say a word more just now. When Jiang Sese came in, she quickly transferred her hatred. What did third sister say? In the Xie family, I don't have to do anything, I don't even need to ask for peace. With such a free time, there's no need to wipe pearl powder for maintenance. Jiang Sese has a rosy face and bright apricot eyes, indicating that he had a good day yesterday, in sharp contrast to Jiang Sese. After Jiang Sese entered, third Prince Nangongchen's gaze clung vaguely to her, secretly angered that this woman dared to lose her child because of Shuer's jealousy. The second wife knew that her daughter couldn't suppress Jiang Sese, so she timely gave each other a step down. Uncle Wu is quite handsome. Previously, I only knew that the young master of the Huang family was good-looking. Today, when I saw him, Uncle Wu was truly good-looking. Jiang Sese couldn't help but take a proud look at Xie Qingyun. Xie Qingyun's skin was indeed unmatched, the dream lover of many women in their previous lives. This kind of small interaction naturally didn't escape Nangongchen's eyes. For some reason, the anger in his heart just now inexplicably added a hint of other emotions. I'm going out for a walk. After speaking, there was no need for anyone to respond, so he swaggered away. Jiang Sese's eyes flickered with a hint of sadness. Nangongchen kept loving herself, saying that she was just like this. Just because she was a child, she refused to cooperate with her on the day she returned home. Although Nangongchen always praises himself for being gentle and virtuous, blaming Jiang Sese for not being sensible and having a malicious mind, every time they appear together, Nangongchen's first glance is always at Jiang Sese. How can Jiang Sese not hate this? Although she is also the second miss of the Jiang family, as the granddaughter of the Minister of Rites, she is proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Isn't it just that her parents have no background and can't compare to Jiang Sese? Why is it that Jiang Sese is the appointed chief consort, and she has to put in a lot of effort to become a third prince's concubine? Knowing that this was not the time to get angry, Jiang Sese worked hard to stabilize her unwillingness. Jiang Sese was just a commoner woman and would not pose a threat to herself. As long as she captures the heart of the third prince, she worries about the future. Thinking of this, Jiang Sese urgently needs to borrow the doctor from the Jiang mansion to recuperate her recently miscarriage body. I'm still feeling a bit unwell, so I'll go to the back hall for a rest first. Jiang Sese stood up softly and was about to leave, but Jiang Sese stopped her. Second sister, yesterday my maid said something interesting to me. She clapped her hands and a woman walked forward with Su Qing. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Protecting her. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Protecting her. Seeing the current situation, Su Qing was immediately panicked. Last night, as soon as she finished reporting a letter, her mother-in-law pulled her to the firewood room and locked her up. It was only now that she was released from the cloth strip in her mouth. This maid said she sent me to the third prince's mansion with the order of her second sister. Is there such a thing? Jiang Sese said with a smile, but her words surprised everyone present. Jiang Sese choked up in her heart. No wonder Jiang Sese could still appear here well. It turned out that the plan had failed. With a hint of confusion on her face, Jiang Sese patiently said in a soft voice, I have never said such a thing before. I don't know what exactly happened. Upon receiving Jiang Sese's gaze, Su Qing, who was crawling on the ground, immediately exclaimed, Miss Wu, it's you who's going to the third prince's mansion. Why do you say that second sister won't have the heart to drive you away? Miss Wu, I have to follow your orders. Jiang Sese slowly touched his nails and stood up in the shallow pride at the corner of Jiang Sese's mouth. At this moment, he didn't forget to splash himself with dirty water. Jiang Sese sometimes really wondered why Jiang Sese hated him so much. After being seriously injured in her previous life, the Xie family sent someone to come and express their willingness to postpone the wedding. However, Jiang Sese convinced Mrs. Jiang to put on an unlucky reputation for herself, lock herself at home, and actively push off the marriage with the Xie family. Thinking about the past, the days when he was forced to enter the palace and endure alone in the deep palace stirred up a ripple in Jiang Sese's peaceful heart. She slapped Su Qing's face with such force that he was knocked down directly. Jiang Sese couldn't help but be taken aback by her disregard for the noble demeanor of a noble woman. Xie Qingyun, who was drinking tea quietly on the side, squinted his pitch-black Xingma's eyes and looked thoughtfully at Jiang Sese. I see you don't shed tears until you see the coffin, said Jiang Sese, finishing the fight and gently stroking his sleeve before throwing out a high-quality golden hairpin. This was found from your personal clothing. Young Mama saw you frequently entering and leaving second sister's yard half a month ago. Madame Zhang's eyebrows couldn't help but jump when she saw her daughter's golden hairpin. She turned her head and saw that Jiang Sese still had a winning expression before settling down slightly. Su Qing shook her head in grievance and said, It's clear that Miss Wu asked the maid to inquire about what Miss Eyre was doing. As for the golden hairpin, Miss Wu instructed the maid to steal it, just to frame Miss Eyre into accepting it privately. After speaking, she knelt at Mrs. Zhang's feet with a regretful expression on her face and said, I understand my mistake. I beg the old lady to give me a way out of this for the sake of my honesty. Mrs. Jiang gave Jiang Sese a fierce sweep, and her words were already extremely angry. How could the Jiang family have such a wicked daughter like you? Malicious. How dare the Jiang family use this word to describe others? What is the act of sending themselves to the palace as palace maids to please Jiang Sese? How was the carriage I was running away prepared? Said Jiang Sese calmly, yawning his body. Su Qing shuddered and said in a reminiscent tone, Miss Wu had already planned a week ago. The groom was arranged by Qin Ji. Is that right? Jiang Sese smiled contentedly. This smile made Jiang Sese a bit restless. After all, she didn't expect Jiang Sese to avoid the cow's attack and marry out intact. Therefore, the escape was a last-minute act, and many details couldn't withstand scrutiny. Forget it, today is a good day. What are you doing with all this? Jiang Sese pressed her handkerchief at the corner of her eye, as if suppressing her grievances. It's really a consistent move. Jiang Sese mockingly stared at Jiang Sese, gently clapping his hands when the opponent's face stiffened. I saw the groom being escorted in. Originally, he agreed to go to the Xie family to pick someone up because he had a lot of money, but one morning someone wanted to capture him, and the groom didn't dare to do anything. As soon as my eyes swept over the colorful clothes behind Jiang Sese, I shouted loudly, "You stinky woman asked me to go pick her up, but I don't know anything. If you want to catch her, just catch her." The colorful clothes wanted to hide back in fear, but they were already grabbed by Jiang Sese and pushed fiercely towards the groom. "Big brother, you can take a closer look. If you can't explain clearly, we'll send you to the government." The groom suddenly panicked. He still had to support his family. How dare he go to the government office? He quickly kowtowed and said, "Everyone, please let me go. It's this girl who gave me gold. She asked me to wait at the Xie family's door. If someone comes up, hurry up and take them to the third prince's mansion, and then make noise and run away." That's interesting. So my servant is dressed in colorful clothes. Jiang Sese squinted his eyes and looked at Jiang Sese with a smile. Mrs. Jiang's aura just now froze, and she looked at Jiang Sese with resentment. "Forget it, let's expose this matter now." Mrs. Jiang spoke to reassure Jiang Sese, but what if Jiang Sese has evidence? Isn't the Jiang family leaning towards her? Jiang Sese sneered and wanted to expose it. "Have you asked the victim? Can you continue, groom?" Madame Jiang let out a furious shout and pointed at Arthur Jiang, almost poking her. "The old lady has already spoken, what are you still making trouble about?" Jiang Sese took a slow step back and didn't take Lady Jiang's finger. He stared at the crowd with a deep gaze and said, "I'm trying to get justice for myself. The Jiang family's calculations involve our Xie family. It's not excessive for Xie to ask for the truth here." The unexpected sound, however, made Jiang Sese feel very familiar. The clear and cold voice was even more penetrating than the snowflakes on the snow, carrying a sense of detachment from the world. Xie Qingyun's disturbance has made it difficult for the Jiang family to say anything. After all, Xie Qingyun is also a famous talent in the capital. It would be bad if he could label their Jiang family as having a backyard fire with just one mouth. Mrs. Jiang remained expressionless and remained silent, only using her gaze to intimidate Su Qing. But under the groom's confession, Su Qing had no other way. Touching Jiang Sese's desire to give up her face, she felt a lump in her heart. She crawled towards Jiang Sese and cried in pain, "Miss Eyre, you can't ignore the servant. It was you who made the servant do this." The servant still left a note. As the thin piece of paper fell, Jiang Sese's face finally changed. She didn't expect this foolish servant to dare to leave evidence to threaten her. "Ah, what does this mean?" Jiang Sese looked at Mrs. Jiang with a look of grievance on his face, and she wanted to see how Mrs. Jiang could explain herself in front of everyone. This maid didn't say a word of truth in her mouth. Who knows who instructed her to deliberately disturb our Jiang family? Mrs. Jiang raised her eyebrows in anger and said lightly, wanting to expose the matter. "Since that's the case, why don't we send it to the government? It's good to investigate who caused harm to our Jiang family." Jiang Sese nodded in agreement, with a hint of caring for our family. Madame Jiang couldn't continue to act, and she didn't do anything to Jiang Sese. Why wouldn't she give her a step? "If you drag it down, you can handle it as you please," Mrs. Jiang had to say, her intimidating eyes scanning the crowd. "My dear friends, please collect and ask for tickets. Your collection is the driving force for me to code characters." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Letting You Give Up and Never Marry You. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Letting You Give Up and Never Marry You. This is the meaning of convicting Jiang Sese, and Jiang Sese took a satisfied sip of tea. Mrs. Jiang spoke lightly, and Su Qin widened her eyes as if she didn't believe she had been abandoned by the Jiang family. Her face turned to ashes and she tightly hugged Jiang Sese's leg, feeling cold all over. Jiang Sese forcefully broke open her hand, with a hint of sarcasm, and met Su Qin's fearful gaze. In his previous life, Su Qin was also like this. He betrayed her for the sake of a southern pearl. When Jiang Sese was beaten to pieces by Ming Jieyu that day, Su Qin felt half guilty. "Miss Wu, please don't, I really knew my mistake. I was trying to save my seriously ill mother. Please Miss Wu." Young Mama looked at Su Qin with disgust and arched from left to right, slapping her to the brink of death. "Shameless lowly slave," Young Mama scolded fiercely, dragging Su Qin's heel mercilessly and pulling him out. The whole hall echoed with a faint howl, and Mrs. Jiang felt as if the sound was deliberately made by Jiang Sese to listen to, which was very penetrating. "I don't know where I apologize to second sister for causing such harm to me." The atmosphere at this moment was particularly strange, and everyone's eyes couldn't help but fall on Jiang Seshue's face. Jiang Sese gritted her teeth and knelt heavily on the ground, ignoring her poor health. "I'm sorry, Sister Wu. I'm too jealous of you. I'm really afraid that the third prince will be taken away by you. That's why I did such a foolish thing." Tears are like pearls falling fragile, making Jiang Seshue's already pale face even more helpless. Jiang Sese is such a person who is best at pretending to be innocent and pitiful. Even if she makes a mistake, it can make people feel that her true intentions are not bad. "Shuer has apologized, what else do you want?" Mrs. Jiang had to step forward to solve this troublesome matter. Jiang Sese is now the concubine of the third prince, and she dare not let anyone be surprised. Jiang Sese seemed to have never heard of it, but she wanted to see how long Jiang Sese could perform. Seeing that Jiang Sese didn't react, Jiang Sese simply knocked her head hard, and her forehead suddenly turned blue and red. Mrs. Jiang exclaimed in surprise as she tried to hold on to Jiang Sese, but was forcefully pushed away by her. "Shuer." Finally, after Jiang Sese kowtowed again, she fainted weakly, and Nangong Chen happened to walk in. Hurriedly hugging Jiang Sese, who was unconscious, he stared gloomily around and said, "What's going on?" Madame Jiang's eyes turned sour upon seeing this, and she added fuel and vinegar by recounting how Jiang Sese had humiliated her sister. Nangong Chen stood up and looked down at Jiang Sese, saying word by word, "I don't want to mind if you poison Shuer's child, but do you insist on pressing me step by step? I won't marry you, even if you do too much." The cold and heartless words made Jiang Sese want to laugh. In his previous life, when he knelt on the ground and called for the Empress Dowager, it seemed like he was still hoping that he would help him seize the throne. The third prince misunderstood. The commoner and the second sister were just discussing the matter, and that child couldn't blame the commoner either. Nangong Chen frowned uncomfortable, didn't he just refuse to marry her? As for Jiang Sese speaking to himself in this tone. "My wife and I have something else to do, so we'll leave first." A pair of slender and powerful hands steadily pulled Jiang Sese over, while blocking Nangongchen's naked gaze. In Xie Qingyin's arms, there was a simple and refreshing bamboo fragrance, like a scroll of calligraphy and painting that made people couldn't help but take a glance. Jiang Sese did not refuse his kindness, obediently stayed in his arms, and playfully and insincerely bowed to the elders in his seat to retire. Mrs. Jiang couldn't wait for the plague god to leave quickly, so she remained calm and didn't answer. The scenery of Jiang Mansion is no different from before. Around a stage, a hanging flower gate entwined with vines appears in front of me. Leaving the Jiang family, Jiang Sese's footsteps relaxed a bit. "Xie Qingyin. I've explained everything about last night, right?" Jiang Sese smiled lightly. Even though he had said it before yesterday, there was no evidence at that time. "I believe today's incident can prove his innocence." Xie Qingyun, who had just stepped out of the gate of the Jiang family, let out a gentle sigh without moving his eyelids. On the second day of his rebirth, he eradicated a traitor and saw that things were moving in a positive direction. Jiang Sese rarely had the urge to go out and explore. After entering the palace in her past life, she never felt the liveliness of the streets in the capital again, so it's natural for her to have a happy life. Xie Qingyun, I want to take a walk on the street. Would you like to go back first or come with me? Xie Qingyun's servant Afu silently prepared to drive, and his young master would definitely not accompany this unruly young lady to go shopping. I'll go back to the mansion. Sure enough, it was in line with Xie Qingyun's incomprehensible answer. Jiang Sese nodded nonchalantly and thought about where to play. The servant happily pulled the reins and knew that his young master didn't like Jiang Sese. As the saying goes, extreme joy brings sorrow. The servant forcefully pulled the reins and broke it. With 4 eyes facing each other, the servant awkwardly smiled wryly. It's difficult for Jiang Sese to notice the unexpected situation here. She tentatively invited Xie Qingyun again and said, why don't we go to the street first? Xie Qingyun rarely strolls the streets, especially with women, but waiting for car repairs is indeed boring, so that's it. The servant Afu watched the two of them leave with tears in his eyes, wondering if he had pushed the young master into the pit of fire. At this moment, Jiang Sese didn't know Afu's inner play, she was strolling with enthusiasm. She was curious about everything on the street, sometimes looking at the sugar figurine and sometimes at the fan. In the midst of Jiang Sese's stop and go, Xie Qingyun took 3 steps with half a sound. He glanced at the small earrings on the shelf, following the cheering voice of Jiang Sese. At first glance, it looks like it's made of worthless stones, and Jiang Sese's taste should not be that bad. Jiang Sese. Okay, that's it. Xie Qingyun, Qinshin's hands were already full of bags, but it couldn't diminish the excitement of accompanying the young lady on a trip. Jiang Sese didn't have the heart to let Qinshin carry too many things. He simply carried a bag of dim sum. This is delicious, wrap it up. Another mouthful full of jam, Jiang Sese pointed to a dim sum and threatened to come with 2 packs. With a gentle hook of his clean hand, the 2 large bags of things easily fell into Xie Qingyun's hands. Jiang Sese looked over with some surprise, not that she was using a petty heart to treat a gentleman's belly, but that Xie Qingyun's precious fingers were never disdainful of mentioning these things. Xie Qingyun gave a cold glance and Jiang Sese obediently turned his head. Didn't you see how others on the street looked at me? This sentence actually dispelled Jiang Sese's confusion. 3 people were shopping, and an old man didn't take anything, which made young passers-by take a few more glances. Looking at the beautiful fingers that looked like jade bamboo, Jiang Sese suddenly remembered the coolness of their agile exploration between the beds for some reason. A pair of small and round earlobes immediately turned red. The car has been repaired. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. A perfect match. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. A perfect match. Jiang Sese listened to Xie Qingyun's words and turned around to find the servant Afu panting and stopping the car waiting for them to go up. Qin Xian quickly took the things in their hands and stuffed them into the carriage. Jiang Sese hesitated slightly as she looked at the plum blossom cake she was shouting at. She had always liked to eat plum blossom cake. But this pot was just beginning to be made, and it was not convenient to park the car in the bustling city. Arthur still persevered with the idea of buying things. Afu, go ahead and wait for us first. Xie Qingyun helped the sedan chair and looked straight at Jiang Sese, who was halfway up the car. Do you have anything else to buy? A little warmth quietly seeped out, and Jiang Sese got off the carriage and smiled at the plum blossom cake, saying, I'll hurry over right away. Xie Qingyun watched as her delicate powder quickly merged into the crowd, with a slight frown. He still signaled with an expressionless face that Afu and Qinshin would leave first, and silently followed Jiang Sese alone. Grandma is sprinkling sesame seeds on the plum blossom cake, and the sweet and sticky little cake is steaming hot. Jiang Sese touched his wallet and took out 1 or 2 silver coins, but the old lady rubbed her pocket dryly and found it hard to find. When Jiang Sese boldly wanted to say that there was no need to change, Xie Qingyun handed over 2 copper coins. "Why did you come?" Jiang Sese looked at Xie, who had not been willing to stroll before with suspicion. Xie Qingyun watched as she contentedly took a bite of plum blossom cake and walked side by side on the outside, saying, "Where did you get the change if I didn't come?" Jiang Sese couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Xie Qingyun accompanied her for a while and then saw through the small treasury in her purse. No wonder she used to want to embezzle more of Xie Qingyun's achievements, but they were always unsuccessful. "Do you want to have one?" He handed over the plum blossom cake that he had not eaten yet, and treated it as a gift for shopping today. "Too sweet." Jiang Sese inexplicably withdrew her belongings. She clearly remembered that in her past life, she would always see a few plum blossom cakes at Xie Qingyun's mansion. Is it possible that he didn't eat it for some beautiful woman hiding in a golden house? However, Arthur wisely didn't ask much, just chewed happily. The smell of gurun slowly drifted over. Xie Qingyun glanced slightly at the exquisite dim sum. He never took the initiative to eat these sweets. He could know that the taste of plum cake was thanks to Jiang Ze's. When Jiang Sese was a child, he squatted outside the school and stuffed a large plate of plum blossom cake into Qin Qinglu's lunchbox. Unfortunately, the young Jiang Sese remembered the order of the lunch boxes and stuffed them into Xie Qingyun's bowl. That day, Xie Qingyun opened his lunchbox and watched as a large pile of white mixed with red and green food was eaten with a straight face. Afterwards, he was also extorted by Qin Qinglu to compensate his sister for her hearty lunch. Ah! Fei Chen accompanied the horse, and the high hooves of the horse were about to run over Jiang Sese's back. Suddenly, the alarm rang in his heart, and Jiang Sese quickly moved sideways, but someone was faster. It landed firmly in Xie Qingyun's arms, watching as the horse's hooves narrowly brushed past the two of them. This time, the embrace was tighter than before, and Jiang Sese could feel Xie Qingyun's breath. At this moment, the owner of the horse also subdued his horse and viciously slapped the disobedient head of the horse, confirming that he had tied it tightly before embracing his fist. "I'm really sorry, my horse suddenly went crazy. I'll compensate both of you a little silver." The owner of the horse bowed bitterly to Jiang Sese and Xie Qingyun, but he didn't expect the horse to run into the street and almost hurt someone. "No need, you're also unintentional. It's not the Virgin Mary of Jiang Sese, but the few taels of silver she doesn't pay attention to are the emergency living expenses of ordinary people." The horse owner repeatedly thanked him. "This lady is really beautiful and kind-hearted, and this master is also skilled. The two are truly talented and beautiful, a perfect match." Jiang Sese almost turned black, "A perfect match." This is not the first time someone has said that. The last time someone said that was still a storyteller. His original words were, "The regent, who covered the sky with one hand and disregarded imperial power, harmed loyalty, benevolence, favoritism, and the law, was simply the first villain of the great Yan dynasty. Jiang Guifei committed the remaining sins of her ministers, formed cliques for personal gain, and even resorted to killing and violating ancestral traditions against the royal children. She was the first culprit of the great Yan dynasty. One sin, one evil, when they are combined, they are a perfect match." Those unpleasant memories swirled in Jiang Sese's mind, so much so that when she heard the perfect match, she suspected that the other person was mocking her. Still not leaving. Xie Qingyun took 2 steps and found that the person had not followed. He turned around and glanced at Jiang Sese. His eyes were like a precious piece of jade, with a feather fan gently sweeping over it. Jiang Sese whispered for a moment and chased after her with slender legs. The sachet on the waist swayed gently with the owner's footsteps, creating a lingering scent of medicine that lingered with the river. Staying in clothes, wanting to wet the apricot blossom rain, blowing the cold willow wind on the face. Just a few days after marrying into the Xie family, a new round of blooming flowers arrived. Apricot blossoms from February slanted in, with pink and white petals pressing against each other, causing the branches to twist and twist. When Jiang Sese heard the news that Empress Dowager had sent 2 more beauties to the third prince's mansion, she was flipping through her own dowry. Unexpectedly, Empress Dowager De, who treated Jiang Sese as her biological daughter in her previous life, now finds Jiang Sese very unpleasant. And ultimately, this is still because of that child. One is the glory of giving birth to Nangong Chen's eldest son, and the other is the miscarriage on the day of their wedding. Coincidentally, Empress Dowager De has always been superstitious and now regards Jiang Sese as unknown, afraid that she will bring bad luck to her son. The matter of Su Qin was discovered by Empress Dowager De, and she scolded Miss Air again. It seems that the third prince hasn't been resting with Miss Air for the past few days because she's not fully recovered. With a heart-wrenching expression of schadenfreude, she asked a maid she knew to help inquire about these news. Jiang Sese was not surprised. Nangong Chen, who appeared to have feelings, was actually just self-satisfied. He needed someone like Jiang Sese who catered to him everywhere to showcase his charm. Nangong Chen may not have much love for Jiang Sese. If someone more cunning were to enter, Jiang Sese might not even be able to sit comfortably as a concubine. By the way, have I prepared everything I did before? Qin Xian quickly smiled and said, I have already packed the scar removal cream, beauty cream that Miss made into 3 different bottles, totaling more than 100 bottles. Jiang Sese nodded with satisfaction. Her medical skills were not only reflected in her ability to treat illnesses and save lives, but also in the fact that some of the women's beauty products she was figuring out had excellent efficacy. Therefore, she decided to make them first and sell them when there was a chance. Mei Xing and I will go to my mother's place to take a look, and then you can count the accounts. Jiang Sese put down his work. Mei Xing is a big maid who was promoted after Su Qin left. She doesn't talk much and works quickly. When Mrs. Xie heard that Jiang Sese had come to pay her respects again, she hesitated and shook her fan. She couldn't understand this daughter-in-law anymore. Seeking collections and tickets, end of this chapter. Chapter 10. First Step Chess. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 First Step Chess. But it has to be said that every move and gesture of Jiang Sese's company is very comfortable. After all, if Jiang Sese wants to please someone, those years of deep palace life were not vegetarian. Mother, sister-in-law is also here. Jiang Sese took off his thick cloak, and the water-green pleated skirt was fresh and tender, like a little tender green in February. Are siblings also here to admire the flowers? Chen Chuanjiao glanced at Jiang Sese with a sideways glance and carefully occupied the position closest to Lady Xie. Jiang Sese's eyes flashed with a hint of clarity upon seeing the situation. Chen Chuanjiao comes from a business background, and although the Xie family treats her very well, she cannot help but feel a bit insecure in her heart. Jiang Sese's marriage changed her previous unruly and capricious demeanor, and her knowledgeable and rational demeanor earned several compliments from Mrs. Xie's grandmother. Chen Chuanjiao was afraid that if her mother-in-law fell in love with Jiang Sese, she would despise her daughter-in-law, who was covered in a foul smell of copper. Mother, what's going on? Jiang Sese approached and realized that Mrs. Xie was complaining about something to Chen Chuanjiao, with a dejected expression on her face. Chen Chuanjiao rolled her eyes slightly impatiently, thinking to herself, how could you, miss, also come to pay attention? Mom's face was scratched, didn't you see it? Jiang Sese gently pressed her head against Mrs. Xie's left face, only to find 2 very thin and long incisions. Has this been scratched by the hairpin? Mrs. Xie nodded, slightly embarrassed. Last night, when she took off her hairpin herself, who knew she accidentally scratched her face? The key is that she is so old, and her skin recovery ability is not as good as those little girls. I really don't know what kind of scar her wound will leave. Has that mother ever used medicine? Madame Xie has indeed seen it, and the doctor has also taken some medicine, but she has used many of those medicines herself and knows the effects they will have. Seeing Mrs. Xie's expression lethargic and unwilling to say more, Jiang Sese also thought of the key point. Coincidentally, the newly made scar removal cream can be used now. Jiang Sese said to Mei Xing, "Go and get the scar cream from my room." Mei Xing quickly responded and walked out with small steps. Chen Chuanjiao looked over curiously and said, "Did you bring the scar-removing cream from the Jiang mansion?" Jiang Sese didn't explain. After all, if it were done by herself, they probably wouldn't be willing to use it. "Miss, I have brought over the scar removal cream." Mei Xing handed over an item in a white jade box, and Jiang Sese unscrewed the lid and sniffed it carefully. After confirming that the item was correct, he smiled and placed it next to Mrs. Xie's hand. "Mother, if your medicine doesn't work well, why don't you use mine first? My medicine has excellent effects." Chen Chuanjiao quickly picked up the box and carefully looked at it for a while, feeling slightly puzzled. "Why haven't I ever seen your box sold outside before? Is it a legitimate product?" This box was customized by Jiang Sese himself, and if it's sold outside, it's a ghost. There's no problem with the things. The people in our mansion made them themselves. After speaking, Jiang Sese took a leisurely sip of tea. The aroma of the wine was not afraid of the depth of the alley. She was confident that Mrs. Xie would give up the original product after trying it once. Mrs. Xie hesitated for a moment. The Jiang family is not a family of doctors, so this thing won't disfigure herself, will it? Jiang Sese didn't try to persuade everyone's expressions, as the things had already been given. If Mrs. Xie was willing to try, she would know that what she said was true. However, sending beauty cream to Mrs. Xie today is just a convenience, and the most important thing is that she needs to discuss food and supplies with Chen Chuanjiao. A major event will occur in 6 months, which is the serious corruption of the military pay of the general of Xinhua. This matter will shock the court and the public, and it will directly threaten the position of the crown prince in the court. And what Jiang Sese needs to do is to prepare a batch of provisions to trade with the general of Xinhua before the situation is exposed, in exchange for the intelligence she wants. "Sister-in-law, I was actually planning to go see you tonight. I didn't expect you to be with my mother, so I won't have to go one more time." Jiang Sese smiled softly and naturally took Chen Chuanjiao's hand. Chen Chuanjiao's face stiffened and her heart should have been in a panic, but it was also difficult to pull her hand out in front of her mother. "Law. What are you looking for me to do?" "Looking for my sister. In Law to do business." Jiang Sese looked at the other side with suspicion and didn't show any concern. "I want to collect some provisions and sell them when the season changes. I know my sister. Law is good at managing things and would like to ask for her help. Of course, the dividends will also be given according to the rules." Chen Chuanjiao felt a little proud in her heart. She came from a business background and knew how to make money. With her father. Law's character of preferring to die rather than accept gifts, she would have gone to the west and north without taking care of her family. Thinking about these things, Chen Chuanjiao felt a bit complacent, but still kept an eye on her. "Now that the grain and forage business is not making much profit, how much do you plan to collect?" Jiang Sese extended 5 fingers lightly. Puff. Chen Chuanjiao sprayed directly, "You're crazy, you've collected so much. Now that it's past the coldest time, you can't sell so much." "Sister-in-law, I have acquaintances who can sell me," she said with a steady smile. Mrs. Xie couldn't help pounding her chest and feet. She finally understood what kind of business this spendthrift daughter. Law wanted to do, not to mention that Jiang Sese, a wealthy lady, couldn't distinguish between income and expenses, nor did she listen to any lady reselling food and grass. "Sis, if you're short of money, talk to your mother. I still have a set of jewelry, why don't you take it first? Mrs. Xie spoke politely, as she had to do something before Jiang Sese finished her dowry. Chen Chuanjiao's happy mood just now became depressed again. Can Jiang Sese be short of money? Why did the mother give her something back? Mother, believe me, I really want to do business, Jiang Sese said softly, causing Mrs. Xie's goosebumps to fall on the ground. It's okay, just do it if you want. Mrs. Xie simply drank tea with her head down, as long as she didn't owe any debts. I'll get back to you in a week. Anyway, she can still take Jiang Sese's wages for free without paying, and if she doesn't do it, she won't do it for free. However, Chen Chuanjiao still has to proudly set out the plan, so that Jiang Sese doesn't think she's interested in doing business for her. Jiang Sese smiled and agreed. Chen Chuanjiao's family has a lot of business opportunities, and she is sure to gather all the food and supplies within half a month. Since you're here, let's have dinner with me. Mrs. Xie happened to have learned a dish today and wanted to make a fish, but when Mr. Xie was not around, she could only invite her daughter-in-law to help taste it. The two people who were originally leisurely drinking tea had a stiff expression on their faces. Mrs. Xie's cooking skills are not related to her exquisite appearance, and it is difficult for Mr. Xie to survive after eating for so many years. Mother, I need to feed Baozhu. Chen Chuanjiao quickly pulled her daughter as a shield. Jiang Sese could only watch Chen Chuanjiao slip away, thinking for a while and finding a suitable reason. Moreover, it was time to cultivate a relationship, and Jiang Sese couldn't bear to hurt someone else's good intentions. Tickets collection, end of this chapter.